Well, good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is October 10th in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and He does love you. And I am broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the overcast Central Susquehanna Valley in the Great Keystone State. A lot of things happening in the news day, but nothing major. I'm still trying to follow up on a lot of this Las Vegas shooter stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow because there's still a lot of information coming out. They found a note, and the note evidently contained sniper information. And what do I mean by sniper information? Well, he was calculating angle, like, downward angle, trajectories, to get the best effective shooting that he could from the room. Like I said, everything's still unfolding, and it's amazing to me how many people who do not have firsthand knowledge of what was going on there are postulating so many different theories out there. It's ridiculous. Social media is awash with this propaganda and this, this just. I'm lost for words on this. It is a type of propaganda. It is a fake news. It's a InfoWars-like-esque. All the things that are coming out, all the theories about what happened there. And again, it's from all these people who have no firsthand knowledge of what was going on there. We're just finding out last night and this morning about the note. We also found out that, casinos, although they watch their moneymakers. That's what they have the videos on. They watch their moneymakers, but they don't necessarily pay a lot of attention to the comings and goings in the hotel rooms. And I got to think that has something to do with their campaign, their advertising campaign on TV. What goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. So I don't think they're really big on recording or paying attention to what's actually happening in a hotel. If it's not on the casino floor, that's, it's out of their purview, as it were, because it doesn't make them any money. Although I think that's going to change after this. I mean, there's always, out of tragedy, there's always some good things that come out of this. So the conspiracy theorists out there are just running rampant, putting out fake news, fake analysis. A lot of this is on Twitter. A lot of it's on Facebook. A lot of this, a vast amount of it's on YouTube. And I have to believe they're only doing that just to try to get the clicks, so they can get advertising revenue, so they can make some money off of it. So I'm not weighing, and you know me, I don't normally weigh into this stuff until it's on down the road. Although I will weigh into something because I have been following this. Today on One American News Network, the Veritas project, Project Veritas, they unveiled their part one of their American Pravda, the New York Times. Now they've been sort of keeping it under wraps what it was, and a lot of people speculated. I was watching it this morning from 10 to 11 of part one. Fantastic. And you talk about, they want to get it right. Project Veritas wants to get it right. They don't just go after for the sensationalism of it. They actually try to verify their facts before they run with the story. And it's evidenced in this video. And it just, I'm blown away. I'm blown away by some of the things I found in there, and hopefully, I know it'll be released to YouTube eventually, and if you go over to projectveritas.com, you'll see a 14-minute clip of this video. James O'Keefe, he's not messing around over there. It's not like he's working in his mom's basement to do this. This guy has a team. I didn't even realize his team was this big. I knew he had some folks working with him, but my goodness, I mean, this guy's got a team set up to do this type of investigative journalism that the lamestream media used to do. And after this report, I knew it was bad with CNN, But after this first part, I can't wait to see the second part. But after this first part, honestly, if you believe Project Veritas, and I do because they confirm everything that they're doing, and if you're not just a political hack that lives inside your narrative echo chamber, I don't understand how you could believe anything the lamestream media tells you from here on out. I really don't. And it just, I like what he's doing. I don't think I could do what he's doing. As far as doing the undercover stuff, doing behind the scenes stuff like he's doing now in the offices and stuff, I think it's fantastic. And he has like an army out there across the country that's capturing this stuff. And there's people talking, you know, it'll blow you away, folks. Honestly, it will blow you away. The official drink of the Dan Clements Show is Rocky Mountain High Brand. It does help me with my fibromyalgia. It is hemp infused with 100 milligrams of hemp. It takes the edge off the pain. They have energy drinks. They have a black iced tea, which is very delicious. And they also have a lemonade, which is what I drink, because it doesn't have any extra caffeine in it. They have power drinks or power shots. They have Rocky Mountain High bars. And they also have Eagle Spirit alkaline water that you can buy. And just full disclosure on this, I do own stock. Not a lot, but I own stock in Rocky Mountain High Brands as part of my retirement portfolio, and that's why I made it the official drink of the Dan Clements Show. Ha ha! All right. Today's daily Bible reading comes from the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verses 27 through 29. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in the power of your hand to do so. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come back, and tomorrow I will give it, when you have it with you. Do not devise evil against your neighbor, for he dwells by you for safety's sake. And I just wanted to, I think the first part of that, to me, I think that's common sense, but there's a lot of people that do that. I can think of a lot of businessmen that were holding on to money that was owed me longer than what they should have. And they were making money off of that money by putting it in CDs and making a little bit of interest. And you heard me talk about this before when I was raising poultry. And this company we were raising for, I won't name them, they were doing it to every farmer. It was taking us upwards of 60 days to get our checks after the chickens were already processed. And in that 60 days, they made a lot of money off the interest, and the state stepped in and clamped down on producers like that, and any animals that are being produced like that, that the payouts have to be paid out within 15 days of the animals leaving the farm. And I almost said it. The feed company I was working for and raising chickens wasn't the only one doing it, and they fought back a little bit. But the state passed a law about that, and that they lost literally millions of dollars that they were stealing from the farmers. And so if you have it, don't tell somebody to go away and you'll give it to them later, especially if you have it in hand. Give it to them there. It's theirs. A good friend of mine who's passed away is a member of the church. He was an elder in the Church of Christ. He told me one time, he said, when he gets a bill on his table, on his desk, that money that bill represents is no longer his, and he pays it right away. He's not one of these guys that'll wait 30 days and then pay it. He would pay the bill right away and send it right back out. And because of that, he had some interns come in, were shocked that he didn't have any accounts payable. They said, well, where's your accounts payable? Well, we don't have any. As soon as the bill comes in, we pay it and send it right back out. And that wasn't what they were taught in college. But in real life, that's what this dear friend of mine did. And I believe God blessed him in his business for that. But it's not so much that. It's verse 29. Do not devise evil against your neighbor, for he dwells by you for safety's sake. You know, there is safety in numbers. And I will protect my neighbor as much as I'll protect my own family. And because of that, I don't want to devise evil plans against our neighbors. I don't want to do that at all. Because what happens if I need his help sometime? Or her help? And I've been planning evil against them all this time. I'm not going to get that help, folks. We really need to understand that we live in any community, in any city, any state, any country. We live in a connected community, and we should seek the best, or seek the best for our neighbors. And a lot of times that best may seem like tough love, and sometimes it is. But it's for the best for that person. Today's quote meal comes from a person called Buder, B-U-R-D-E-R. Humility is the Christian's greatest honor. The higher men climb, the farther they are from heaven. You know, God talks about this a lot. Those that will raise themselves up will be abased, and those that will humble themselves will be, lifted up. I like this one here from Kyle Butt. He's got a master's in divinity, and he works over at apologeticspress.org. People all over the world associate atheism with immorality. And it's a good article to read. I encourage you to go and read that. And that's exactly right. That a lot of people associate atheism with immorality. When they tried to, I believe it was liberal Texas, when that was first founded, it was founded on atheistic principles, and the place went literally to hell in a handbasket very quickly because of that. Because atheists, ethical humanists, they do not have an objective moral standard that they live by. And since they don't have an objective moral standard that they live by, anything goes. Everything's right. I got in this discussion. This is why we were talking about socialism yesterday, and about not socialism so much, but fascism and participatory fascism here in America. We were in this feed, and I got ripped in this feed on Facebook. We're having a discussion. I thought we were having a discussion. There was a comment made that the government, and this is in my folder here today, we'll cover this real quick. The comment was made that the government should be able to force, or the government should force companies to pay for people's birth control, especially women's birth control. Of course, guys, birth control isn't all on the women. It really isn't all up to the women. I mean, there's steps you can take too. They're very inexpensive and they're very effective. So it's not all up to women, but this idea of birth control has been glamorized by feminists out there. But it was the idea, it wasn't so much the birth control, because the person was complaining about Donald Trump signing some executive orders within the bounds of Medicare, and he's pretty much, he said, Trump tweets, "I will be using power of the pen to get greater health care, to great health care to many people." And a lot of people are talking about this, saying, and we're talking about those in the anti-freedom crowd that want single payer health care. Well, he can't take an executive order and do this. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Back the horses up there a little bit, bub. Most of the extras that were tacked on to Obamacare came through executive orders, unconstitutional legislative executive orders. So all Trump is doing is taking his pen and a phone and getting rid of those unconstitutional executive orders, which is his prerogative, and it's the right thing to do. And people are just up in arms about this, especially when it comes to the birth control issue. Okay? A couple other things in the news I just want to go over real quick here. Russia signals move to require U.S. broadcasters to register as foreign agents. Their broadcasters are foreign agents. I wonder, and I glanced at this. I'm not going to go into it. I just want to show you some of the headlines here. I wonder if guys like me on the internet who have, I do have folks that listen to me in South Africa, the Ivory Coast of Africa, Australia, England. I think there's a couple folks in Europe that listen to me. Surprise, surprise. I never see anything in Russia. I used to have someone in China that listened to me, and they actually would chat with me, and they called in one time, and this was years ago. And it wasn't too long after they called in that she sort of disappeared off. I don't say that funny, but it just, she disappeared. And, I got to think that the Chinese government stepped in and just stopped her internet connection. Hopefully they didn't do anything more to that. But it seems strange to me that they're requiring broadcasters to register as foreign agents, or they're making that move. They're signaling that move to that. There's a lot of things. CNS News is a good site to go to. There's a lot of things they're talking about on there. Columbus Day was yesterday. And folks, I just got to, can I say something about Columbus Day? There has been so much revisionist history on Columbus. It's not even funny. It just really isn't. We'll get into that also, but it amazes me how well-educated people can fall for all this guff that's going on out there about Columbus Day. But what I really want to get into right now is the American Pravda story by Project Veritas. And they're basically, let me get over to it here. American Pravda over at Project Veritas. Let me go ahead and go over and get that on the. I wasn't going to bring it up on the website, but I think I'll do that anyway. Let's get over here and get that up on the website, just so you can see it. The wonders of computers, right, folks? Oh, okay. Now, American Pravda, New York Times, slanting the news and a bizarre Comey connection. And they go on talk down through here about the Nick Dudick, audience strategy editor for the New York Times video, says the Times slants anti-Trump news to the front page, and we always do. Claims to be gatekeeper for the New York Times videos. My imprint is on every video we do. Worked for both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama campaigns. Admit he won't be objective. That's why I'm here at the New York Times. New York Times Ethical Handbook. Journalists must do nothing that might raise... I'm sorry, folks. I can't read this one without laughing. Journalists must... This is their ethical handbook now. Journalists must not do or do nothing that might raise questions about their professional neutrality or that of the Times. It's funny. They're talking about this is in their ethical handbook. And New York Times, when it comes to journalism, was one of the most unethical newspapers in the lamestream media when it comes to journalistic integrity and ethics. Says former FBI Director Comey is his godfather. I should have recused myself, he said. Durdick's family members deny Comey claim and continuation of American Pravda series, which began with CNN videos. We started. Remember the videos came out about CNN. It all started there, and it amazed me what these people were saying, and yet there wasn't a real big uproar in American culture about this. And I think the reason is because it's not getting enough play. The lamestream media is not going to play this. They're circling the wagons. They're going to protect their own. Okay? So it's up to the new Main Street media and folks like me that do commentary shows to get this information out. Now, as I said earlier, One American News Network played the first part. It's about an hour long. And I was just blown away by what I saw in there. Just real quick here. Out of New York, Project Veritas has released a video of the New York Times video gatekeeper Nicholas Dudick, who was caught on hidden camera boasting of his lack of journalistic ethics. Dudick also serves as audience strategy editor, displays a lack of integrity throughout the video, manages videos which go on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram for the Times. While talking about being objective at the Times, Dudick replies candidly, "No, I'm not. That's why I'm here." Dudick considers himself an important player at the New York Times, telling the Project Veritas journalists, "My voice is on, my imprint is on every video we do." Dudick goes on to explain what he might do to target President Trump. I'd target his businesses, his dumb, and folks, I'm sorry I couldn't blank this out here, his dumb son, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric, target that, get people to boycott going into his hotels, boycott. I'm going to get that. I got to get that out of there. boycott. So a lot of the Trump brands, if you can ruin the Trump brand, you can put pressure on his businesses, and you start investigating his businesses, you start shutting it down. Or they're hacking or other things. He cares about his business more than he cares about being president. He would resign, or he'd lash out and do something incredibly illegal, which he would have to. Very incoherent on his statements here. This Durdak or Dudich, I think it's Dudich. This Dudich guy seems to forget that Donald Trump turned over the day-to-day business runnings to his sons. And quite frankly, between being president and the tweeting and golfing, I don't think he has time to run his businesses. I really don't. And love him or hate him, I don't think there's any middle ground with Donald Trump except for guys like me. You know, I'm one of these guys that, you know, I'll praise him when he does right, and I will correct him or chastise him when he does wrong, in my opinion. Now, my opinion can stand to be corrected. And a lot of folks, can I say something real quick about opinions while we're talking about this? A lot of folks thinks, and I said this before on the show, and it really sticks in my craw on social media when they said, well, that's my opinion, and we can just agree to disagree. When their opinion isn't based on any facts or any truths or any evidence of what they're actually opining about is factual or it's true. It's just, oh, it's my opinion. They equate their feelings, how they feel about something, with their opinion. Well, I feel this way about it, so this is my opinion about it. And that's all the further they go. And that's a problem in our society, and I see this in the lamestream media all the time. They have a certain opinion about Donald Trump, and they're not going to be dissuaded of that opinion, so they just go on their own narrative, their talking points, they're living in their echo chamber because they already come to the conclusion that Donald Trump needs to be taken out of office. He's a bad man. He's going to hurt this country. He's going to destroy this country. But what they don't realize is it's their own activities, their own fake news, putting forth their feeling-filled opinions as facts and using a newspaper like the New York Times to do their dirty work with. And the New York Times seems perfectly willing to allow this to happen. And you get what's happening in this country. And actually, the press, the old guard, the lamestream media, they're the ones that are destroying this country. They're the ones that are stirring up culture wars that don't need to be stirred up just to attack President Trump. And this is filtered down into social media. I get tirades all the time against me on social media because, well, you think you're right. Yeah, until I'm proven wrong. Prove me wrong. And if you prove me wrong, I'm humble enough, I'll change my opinion. I mean, for goodness sakes, I'm a Christian now. I didn't always used to be a Christian. But if someone shows me the evidence and the proof and the truth and the facts that what I'm saying is wrong, I'll change. I'll change. But this doesn't happen in our culture today. Too many people have misconceptions about what opinions are. Too many people go on their feelings and are very subjective about the way they look at things. And we're at a point where nobody can recognize objective morality. And we're at a bad place in our country. And Project Veritas has been pointing this out. Whether they meant to do this or not, I think it's a byproduct of their investigative journalism into these, like Planned Parenthood. That really should have shut Planned Parenthood down. But again, we have too many people that are going and living off their emotions and using their emotions and their feelings as part of their opinions to put forth, which really, their opinions are better put on, a compost pile so you can fertilize the gardens, because that's all they're worth. If your opinions aren't backed in truth and facts and reality, and they're not objective, what are they actually worth? So I had to take that tirade in there because there's a lot of opinions going on out there, and that's why the lamestream media still is chugging along here, because of people's opinions of them haven't been changed, because too many people are going on their emotions and their subjective values instead of looking at things objectively. This was funny. When the undercover journalist asked Dudich if he could make sure that the anti-Trump stories made it to the front, he replied, "Oh, we always do." As stated in the New York Times Ethical Handbook, the goal of the New York Times is to cover the news as impartially as possible. It continues in section 20. I still can't say that without laughing, folks. Journalists have no place in the playing field of politics. Staff members are entitled to vote, but they must do nothing that might raise questions about their professional neutrality or that of the Times. And folks, I'm sorry. I think that's funny. That's supposed to be an ethical handbook, folks, and that's funny because there's nothing to do with ethics in there at all, not at all. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. I want you to go over One American News Network. I think it's 5 p.m. this afternoon. They're going to be running that. Eventually, what One American News Network does after they've run that and got their worth out of it. It will be up on YouTube to see because I've seen their Project Veritas, and it'll be at Project Veritas too. Eventually, the whole kit and caboodle like they had the past kit and caboodle. I'm sorry, folks. That New York Times ethical handbook's got me into kind of a jovial, crazy, funny type. I don't know if I can hold it together throughout the rest of the show. And we do have some serious things we need to talk about here. All right. Since Columbus Day was yesterday. Oh, wait a minute. Before we get into Columbus, I did promise I would get into this article here from the independent.org about the real educational choice debate isn't about money. It's about government control by Vicky Alger. And let me just bring that up to you and go over this. I don't think I have this up on the... no, we'll just go over this like I used to here. This is posted April 17th of this year. And it's still a valid argument today. Last week I had the pleasure of speaking about the future of school choice at an event hosted in Washington, D.C. by the Independent Women's Forum featuring Heritage Foundation's Lindsay Burke and SAVE President Edward Bartlett. The core issue of this public policy debate is not about money. It's about competing visions over who has the right and responsibility for the education and upbringing of children. The rationale animating the creation of the U.S. Department of Education is that government knows best. Consider the remarks of Congressman Samuel Moulton of Illinois 1 year before the U.S. Department of Education was originally established back in 1867. The department would be a pure fountain from which a pure stream could be poured upon all the states. We want a controlling head by which the conflicting systems in the different states can be harmonized, by which there can be uniformity. I take the high ground that every child is entitled to an education at the hands of somebody, and this ought not to be left to the caprice of individuals or the states so far as we have any power to regulate it. Remarks made on June 8, 1866. Flash forward 150 years. Earlier this month, Arizona enacted what is being hailed as the most expansive choice program in the country. A universal education savings account program, which is being phased in to include all students over the next few years, and it's SB 1431. The concept behind Arizona's ESA program is simple. Parents don't prefer public district or charter schools or charter schools simply inform the state, and 90% of the state-based funding that would have gone to the public school is deposited in a child's ESA instead. That amount would be approximately $5,600 for each non-disabled student. Students from low-income families would receive 100% of the state-based funding. And so she goes on in that article on that. But what I find most intriguing about this is back in 1866, June 8th, 1866, there was folks even back then, and you got to remember what was happening back then. Now, this was shortly after or around the Civil War, shortly after. And Fabian socialism was all the rage over in Europe. And one of the things, even during the Civil War, people were still going to school. Young folks were still being sent to school, and it was fairly cheap to send a child to European schools. But it was also fairly cheap to send them to the American schools too, and get an education in America. But what was happening was these students were going over to these colleges and universities over in Europe, England and Europe, where Fabian socialism was all the rage, and they came back and spread this Fabian socialism. But I imagine there was folks already on the continent here, even back in the mid-1800s, that had this idea of control. And we talked about this a little bit on the show yesterday, this participatory fascism. It's about government control. Government really doesn't want to own, at least for the most part, because they see it doesn't work. They've seen the Soviet Union, Mao's China. They see it happening down in Venezuela and some of these other countries, Cuba, things like that, where government control ruins the country as far as controlling everything, owning everything and controlling everything. So what elitists have done, they backed off of that total control thing and total ownership and just done away with the total ownership and have more gone towards the total control. And one of the arguments, or one of the things we discussed in Facebook yesterday, because this lady said that the government should be able to force companies to deliver or force companies to include birth control in their insurance. And what is being really meant by that is it has to be offered to everybody. I'm 55 years old. My wife is in similar age, and we're not planning on having any kids anymore. But I don't expect, nor do we need, but I wouldn't expect someone to pay for my birth control or my wife's birth control. It's ridiculous. Birth control is so cheap. Guys, birth control is so cheap. It really is. It's that cheap that if, let's say you're a smoker, if you just not buy a pack of cigarettes, you could buy a whole lot of condoms. Okay, I'm just saying. And folks, this is what really gets me upset about this, is these anti-freedoms folks out there think everybody needs everything, and we just have to have everything within a certain budget. And if you can't afford it, well, we'll get the government to pay for it. We'll get the taxpayers to pay for that. Folks, normal people, normal, rational people make trade-offs all the time in their family budgets. An emergency comes up. We were going to spend some money on something else, a little bit of money. We don't have a lot because I haven't been working. But we were going to spend a little money on something else. But our car, we have a 2011 Nissan. It almost left my wife's setting. I told her to turn the key off on it. It wasn't running. It wouldn't get up over a certain mile an hour. It just, I told her to turn the key off, let it set for 5 minutes, and turn it back on. And she made it home with no problem. Check engine light came on, made it home with no problem. And she goes, well, what was that? I said, well, there's a sensor or something wrong or gone bad. We'll have to take it up to the shop and get it fixed. And she goes, well, why is it running now? And I said, well, the computer will reset that so you can get somewhere. You know, the engineers weren't that dumb. They made it that way. But we spent $280 getting a mass air sensor. That's what it was. They put a new one on. It fixed the problem. Go figure, right? But them sensors aren't cheap. So we had to make a trade-off, you know. And people do that all the time in their budgets, especially when you live closer to hand-to-mouth like I do, and me and my family do. Some folks that don't live that close to hand-to-mouth, they may not have as many trade-offs, but there again, you don't know. You don't know what their budgets are. You know, if we could have afforded it and had the choice to do so, we'd have kept our son in charter schools. But they just, at the time, the state was messing with everything, withholding funds. Charter schools were dropping like flies because they weren't getting the funding that was supposed to follow the students. So we packed it in, and my son went to high school, and what a mess that was, right? But education isn't about money, it's about control. Who controls the narrative? Too many times I've talked to folks where their kids had come home and they sort of have to re-educate them, when they got home, because the school said something that was factually incorrect. It was more PC to say it, but it was factually incorrect. And I've had parents tell me that, in just discussions with them, that they had to correct things when they got home. So this idea that the federal government should have anything to do with our educational system goes back to this fascistic ideology of control. If they can control the education, they can control the narrative that the kids are being taught. Now, the original, if you go back to the founding of the country and the actual principle of federalism, if you really look into that principle of federalism, education is best left to the state levels, because if your state isn't doing a good enough job, guess what? You can move to another state to get your children educated. A lot of people do that. My goodness, back when we moved here in 1988, the Berwick Bulldogs in Berwick, PA, they were actually, and they got busted for this, they were actually recruiting student athletes, and finding good paying jobs for their parents and helping their parents move here to Berwick. So Berwick can have that. Berwick used to be the team to beat. I don't know how many state titles Berwick has, but when it finally all came out, in the open, it was a big to do here in central Pennsylvania, that Berwick was literally recruiting high school students. So there again, it wasn't about the money. They were packing their football team so they could win. And people actually moved because of that. Okay, getting back to my point about the states, if the states, and this, folks, this is a fact. This isn't my feelings. This isn't how I hope things to be. If you look at the numbers of these higher taxed states like New York State is bleeding residents. You got places like Texas and Florida that are just booming with new American citizens. Not new in the way of immigrants, but citizens moving from one state to another. They're booming. As a matter of fact, New York is in jeopardy, and Pennsylvania the same way, in jeopardy of losing some electoral college votes because of that, and some House districts, and they're moving down to like Florida and Texas and things like that. It amazes me how people don't understand that folks can move to other places to improve their conditions. And that's the same way with schooling. If the federal government wasn't involved in it, and you had let's just say you had Pennsylvania and New York, since we're right next to each other. Of course, we have a lot of other states around us. But let's say New York was just doing a horrible job of teaching their children the basics, like reading, writing, and arithmetic. And they decided they're going to teach their kids about all the social justice stuff. And parents are getting fed up because their kids are not being educated. They're being dumbed down. But they looked at the South, to Pennsylvania, and now their kids are scoring high in math and reading and writing and all the other curriculum that could get them further in life. Parents will move. And you know what? I know it costs a lot to move, but parents will do that. Parents will sacrifice for their kids to make sure they get a good education. It's a fact of life, folks. And that's the way the original Federalist system was supposed to be. That these states would compete. Not only compete, but they would protect their citizens that lived inside their state boundaries from an overreaching federal government. And they used to do it more effectively before the 17th Amendment that made the senators directly elected to Congress. But still, if we got rid of, folks, I think one of the biggest things we could do to right some of the wrongs in this country is to abolish the 17th Amendment and put the senators back in direct control of the states, to give the states a check on the federal government. They don't have that anymore. Because who do the senators actually represent? The states. Now, how do they do? Who are they answerable to in the states? Are we the people? How's that working out? We have a diverse state like Pennsylvania. I mean, diverse politically in Pennsylvania. And you have one Democrat and one Republican senator in the state. How does the whole state control them when we're almost evenly split politically in the state. We have congressional districts. It's easier for me to get a sit down or talk to my congressman than it is my senator. And if enough of us come up and talk to our congressman about something, and it's a correct thing to do, it's not something illegal, it'd be better for the state, better for the country, we can persuade him or her to do that. But how do you do that with a senator? It's very, very hard. So this idea of education is about control. This idea about fascistic ideology is about control. Not necessarily ownership, but it's about control. The Department of Education doesn't own the schools, but they sure to control them. And that's just another, as I'm going through this and rethinking everything, and again, here's another example that I had a certain ideology up until this point, and when I read this article about participatory fascism, it's like someone took, I was blind and now I see, the old song says. And it's amazing to me if I apply that ideology to what's going on in America today, how ingrained fascistic ideology is in our country. And no, we don't have the death camps. And you don't need death camps to have fascistic ideology or fascism in the country. That's just how fascists of the past had done it and failed miserably. So what do? Well, the elitists, somebody somewhere along the line started thinking, you know what, if we just leave this, this killing off of it and just go for the economic control over everything that we can, that'll be easier for us. The people won't notice it as much because we're not killing people. And voila, you have where we're at here today. We have a fascistic economy going on. We don't have a free market economy going on in today. Now, this brings me back to Columbus Day was yesterday. And I even asked my wife, I said, was Columbus Day yesterday? Because I seen all these on there and I was just teasing her. But I'm like, was Columbus Day yesterday? And she's like, yep, it was yesterday. And I like going to some of these other sources other than lamestream media for the truth about things. And I've studied Christopher Columbus in the past. And was he a totally moral man that didn't do anything wrong? No. And honestly, I'm going to get a little biblical on you here. Anybody that's listening to me, anybody out there in the anti-freedom crowds that want to tear down historical figures, if there's no sin in your life, cast the first stone. If there's no sin in your life, go ahead and cast the first stone. Christopher Columbus was very instrumental in the discovery of the United States. Was he the first one? No, but he was very instrumental into that, and also very instrumental in bringing some Western ideology, some good Western ideology here, but he also had some baggage he carried with him too. Does that make him totally bad? No, it doesn't. It makes him human, just like everybody else. And honestly, and I know I'm going a little bit of a tear here, and I only have about 15 minutes, but this better than now, or holier than now attitude that a lot of the anti-freedom folks have out there is just annoying to no end. It really is. And they can't look at a person and say, yeah, he did some bad things. Okay. For whatever his reasons or her reasons were, they did some bad things, but they did a lot of good things too. We need to recognize both. It's just like, real quick here, the myth of Lincoln. I grew up, Lincoln was the best thing since sliced bread. And as I actually started researching about Lincoln was a pretty bad president. He's not a president that I would emulate. Calvin Coolidge is more the president I would emulate if I was president, not Abraham Lincoln. Because Abraham Lincoln really did some damage to the Constitution during his presidency. And that's just a fact. But I'm not going to dismiss him out of history. He did do some good things, but he also did some bad things. And we need to recognize that in both, in everybody. And we can honor the good without elevating the bad. But it seems like the anti-freedom folks out there cannot separate that. They can't separate the good in somebody from the bad. It just, that boggles my mind, you know, and I come back to the idea that they have a holier than thou attitude, you know, and I also honestly believe that if you think along the lines of the anti-freedom folks and want to just destroy people because of their history, why aren't they talking down? Why aren't these anti-freedom folks talking down Che Guevara? Yesterday was the 50th anniversary of his execution. Che Guevara was a monster. I was reading through his histories, hadn't had before. I was reading through them again for refresh my memory. This guy was a monster. There wasn't hardly anything redeeming in this guy, in his activities, his thoughts, his actions. Nothing. This guy was a monster, and you have a lot of college students that elevate him up on a pedestal, and yet he was a monster. But you don't hear the anti-freedom folks talking about Che Guevara in that way. But you got a guy like Christopher Columbus, and they want to tear him down. Is it that time we celebrate Columbus Day? A wave of cities have decided to remove the holiday from the calendar and replace it with the Indigenous People Day. Christopher Columbus, an Italian explorer credited with discovering America, and his legacy are under attack, figuratively and increasingly literally. Several Columbus monuments have been attacked and vandalized around the country. The towering Columbus statue at Columbus Circle in New York City now needs 24-hour guards after Mayor Bill de Blasio put it on the list of a commission to review offensive materials. Americans need an alternative to the mainstream media, but this can't be done alone. Oh, that was an advertisement. I'm sorry, folks. According to the Far Left Watch, a watchdog organization, Antifa and other left-wing groups plan to deface and attack Columbus statues across the country on Columbus Day. It is unfortunate to see what once was a uniting figure who represented American courage, optimism, and even immigrants is suddenly in the crosshairs of destruction, or for destruction. We owe it to Columbus and ourselves to be more respectful of man who made the existence of our country possible. Once revered, now maligned, a few historians and activists began to attack Columbus's legacy in the late 20th century. They concocted a new narrative of Columbus as a rapacious pillager and genocidal maniac. Far-left historian Howard Zinn, in particular, had a huge impact on changing the minds of a generation of Americans about the Columbus legacy. Zinn not only maligned Columbus, but attacked the larger migration from the old world to the new that he ushered in. It wasn't just Columbus who was a monster, according to Zinn. It was the driving ethos of the civilization that ultimately developed in the wake of his discovery, the United States. So what Mr. Zinn and this guy, you know, going back to the old left-right paradigm, this guy is off the scale on the left, folks. He really is. This guy is a nut job as far as I'm concerned. I've read some of his histories, and it has nothing. And what I do when I read somebody in the modern era and their histories, I go back and compare it to the histories that were before what they were saying and actually read what the historians were putting out back then, and they don't jive. They don't jive. And I'd rather deal with the ones that were closer to the incident than the ones today. But anyway, behind the English invasion of North America, Zinn wrote, behind their massacre of Indians, their deception, their brutality, was that special, powerful drive born in civilizations based on private profit. The truth is that Columbus set out for the New World thinking he would spread Christianity to regions where it didn't exist. While Columbus and certainly his Spanish benefactors had an interest in the goods and gold he could return from what they thought would be Asia, the explorer's primary motivation was religious. This conviction that God destined him to be an instrument for spreading the faith was far more potent than his desire to win glory, wealth, and worldly honors, wrote historian Samuel Eliot Morrison over a half a century ago. In fact, as contemporary historian Carol Delaney noted, even the money Columbus sought was primarily dedicated to religious purposes. Delaney said in an interview with the Catholic Fraternal Organization of Knights of Columbus, everybody knows that Columbus was trying to find gold, but they don't know what the gold was for, to fund a crusade to take Jerusalem back from the Muslims before the end of the world. A lot of people at the time thought that the apocalypse was coming because of all the signs, the plagues, famine, earthquakes, and so forth. And it was believed that before the end, Jerusalem had to be back in Christian hands so that Christ could return in the judgment. Let me just stop there. Okay. I'm in a silly mood because of the New York Times Ethical Journalist Handbook there. Columbus critics don't just stop at accusing him of greed. One of the biggest allegations against him is that he waged a genocidal war and engaged in acts of cruelty against indigenous people in the Americas. But historians like Delaney have debunked these claims. Rather than cruel, Columbus was mostly benign in his interaction with native populations. While deprivations did occur, Columbus was quick to punish those under his command who committed unjust acts against local populations. Columbus strictly enforced or strictly told the crew not to do things like maraud or rape, and instead to treat the native people with respect. And I remember this from, I was in high school pre-modern Department of Education that we have, okay? And this is what we were taught. There are many examples in his writings where he gave instructions to this effect. Most of the time when injustices occurred, Columbus wasn't even there. There were terrible diseases that got communicated to the natives, but he can't be blamed for that. Columbus certainly wasn't a man without flaws or attitudes, but would be Columbus certainly wasn't a man without flaws or attitudes that would be unacceptable today. But even as a man of an earlier age in which violence and cruelty were often the norm between different cultures and people, Columbus did not engage in the savage acts that have been pinned on him. How Americans once viewed Columbus. For much of the 19th and 20th century, most Americans were taught about Columbus' discovery of the New World in school. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. When a popular poem about the Italian explorer who flew under the Spanish flag. At one time, Americans marveled at what seemed like an unbelievably courageous voyage across unknown waters with the limited tools and maps of the 15th century. It is difficult in the 21st century to imagine what Columbus faced as he crossed the Atlantic in search of what he thought was a route to Asia. The hardship and dangers was immense. If things went awry, there would be nothing to save his little flotilla besides hope, prayer, and a little courage. Most people, even in the 1490s, knew that the earth was round. Most people, even in the 1490s, knew that the earth was round. However, Columbus made a nevertheless history-altering discovery. Actually, I think that was a misprint because they didn't know that the earth was round even in the 1490s. A lot of people were still flat earthers back then, including a lot of the crew with Columbus. The world was a much bigger place than most had imagined, and though Columbus never personally realized the scope of his discovery, he opened up a new world that would one day become a forefront of human civilization. This is the man and the history that earlier generations of Americans came to respect and admire. Unfortunately, Zinn and others caricature of Columbus and American civilization has stuck, and in an era in which radicals and activists search the country for problematic statues to destroy, Columbus is a prime target. Ku Klux Klan pushed anti-Columbus rhetoric. Much of the modern rhetoric about Columbus mirrors attacks lobbied at him in the 19th century by the anti-Catholic and anti-Italian groups like the KKK. In fact, Columbus Day became a nationally celebrated holiday following a mass lynching of Italians in New Orleans, the largest incident of lynching in American history. In 1892, the 400th anniversary of Columbus's voyage, President Benjamin Harrison called for a national celebration of Columbus and his achievements. Americans patriotically celebrated Columbus and erected enormous statues in his honor as the country embraced him. Though American appreciation of Columbus deepened, some groups weren't pleased. The pro-Columbus website, The Truth About Columbus, points out the KKK worked to stop Columbus Day celebrations, smash statues, and reverse his growing influence on American culture. According to The Truth About Columbus in the 1920s, the Klan attempted to remove Columbus Day as a state holiday in Oregon, burned a cross to disturb a Columbus Day celebration in Pennsylvania, and successfully opposed the erection of a statue of Columbus in Richmond, Virginia, only to see the decision to reject the statue reversed. Attempts to quash Columbus failed, but they have re-emerged in our own time through the actions of far left groups who want to see his legacy buried and diminished forever. And the article goes on. I'm running out of time, and the article does go on. But folks, again, we have Zinn. If you don't know who he is, you need to go look him up. You have this guy that Professor Zinn, that's a supposed historian, that distorts everything he touches his fingers to. I haven't read his books from cover to cover. I've read chapters out of books that are available and stuff like that, and compare them to what I was taught and what I can research about the truth of things. It's all PC. His history is PC. He's going back in history to politically correct history. And a lot of people didn't know this about Christopher Columbus, talking about the spreading of religion. You know, and his disciplining his men when he found them to be treating the indigenous population horribly wrong. And let me say something else real quick here. I'm down to just a little over 2 minutes. Not so much in the Caribbean islands that he landed, Christopher Columbus, but it's more so when you got over to the Cancun Peninsula in Mexico and stuff like that, the Incas, the Aztecs, and the Mayans. These were some very wicked, horrible people over there. Now, I know I'm running out of time. Go do your research. You know, these folks, matter of fact, all you got to do is go watch the movie Apocalypto by Mel Gibson. And it's really accurate on, you know, how some of the indigenous population treated others. They went out on raiding parties to get people to sacrifice to their gods. Human sacrifices, folks. Cannibalism was rampant. And there was a reason. I read papers about this. There was a reason why a lot of these, the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incas, why they died out. It was because a lot of it had to do with their cannibalism. A lot of it had to do with the sanitary conditions around their cities, especially with all the sacrifices and the blood and everything, and all the pathogens those things can spread, and the disease and the rotting corpses and stuff like that. Folks, we need to stop listening to some of these politically correct historians, go back and really do some research from historians that knew what they were talking about, didn't have a political bone to grind or stone to grind or anything to grind. And we're trying to get historians' first and foremost job is to try to get history accurate to the best of their ability. And Mr. Zinn absolutely doesn't. I didn't get to everything I wanted to today, so you can go over to the show notes page at thedanclementshow.com and check out everything else in there. I do have the article about the celeb bashing Donald Trump and some other things in there that you might find interesting in that. So, all right, folks, that's the end of the show. The 60 minutes goes by awful quick. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless. And if you enjoy this video or any of my videos, please subscribe, hit the notification button so you know when new videos come up. Give me a thumbs up or down, and more importantly, leave me a comment. I love constructive criticism, folks. I really do. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow at noon.